I think I didn't do anything wrong, just wanted to keep the peace. When the courier handed me the folder marked Refund and Settlement Notice, I thought it was a mistake. Turns out it was my wedding cancellation, signed by the man I was supposed to marry tomorrow. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The engagement party was supposed to be a celebration, not an interrogation. That's what I kept telling myself as I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, pretending everything was perfect. The restaurant shimmered under golden lights, tables covered in white linen, champagne in every glass, people toasting to our future. And yet, even then, Nathan couldn't just let me enjoy it. He'd made that face earlier, the quiet, careful one he used when he disapproved of something, but didn't want to start an argument in public. I'd told him I'd invited Julian, my ex, to the party. He didn't yell, didn't even raise his voice. He just said, "Are you sure that's a good idea?" I said of course it was. We were adults, mature, modern. We'd all moved on, hadn't we? Nathan was so predictable, always worrying about how things would look. I told him that inviting Julian was a sign of emotional growth. Who holds grudges these days? It wasn't like Julian and I were sneaking around. We were just friends. Well, friends who shared history, but still. I said it was important to show that love can change form. He said that sounded like something rehearsed. I told him he should try trusting me instead of analyzing everything I did. By the time we got to the restaurant, the air already felt charged. My mother, Clara, was glowing with excitement. She adored Nathan, but adored my sense of control even more. "You always know how to make an impression," she whispered, while adjusting the pearl necklace I'd borrowed from her. My father, Alan, stood near the bar, watching everything quietly, the way he always did when he didn't agree with me, but knew better than to argue. Julian arrived late, of course, dramatic as ever. He had that same casual charm, a little too confident, a little too familiar. He hugged me tightly in front of everyone, kissed both my cheeks, and said I hadn't changed at all. I smiled because that's what people expected me to do. Nathan stood beside me, polite, expressionless, the model of restraint. I introduced them again, pretending they didn't already know each other. Julian complimented Nathan on the ring he'd chosen for me. "Simple, elegant, responsible, just like you, I bet." I laughed to soften the tension. Nathan didn't. He just nodded and said it was good to see him. Then Julian turned to me and said he still remembered the night I told him I wanted something safe. He winked as if we were sharing an inside joke. I brushed it off, saying people change. The party flowed around us. Glasses clinked, music played, people talked about honeymoon plans and future homes. I floated between conversations, pretending I didn't feel Nathan's eyes on me every time Julian said something a little too personal. At one point, Julian asked if he could make a toast. I hesitated, but said yes. It would have been rude to refuse. He stood up, glass in hand, and smiled that same boyish smile that used to get him out of every bad decision. "To Eveline," he began, "the one who taught me that love isn't always about forever, but about timing. She was my favorite chapter, and now she gets her happy ending. Lucky man." Laughter rippled through the room. A few gasps, too. I laughed the loudest, pretending it was charming, harmless. But Nathan's jaw tightened, and his hand slipped from mine. My mother clapped politely, oblivious, saying how sweet it was. Maggie, Nathan's mother, sat frozen at the table, eyes darting between me and her son. I made a joke about Julian being too sentimental. He said some people never forget their first muse. People laughed again, awkwardly this time. I turned it into a story, explaining how Julian and I had dated years ago, how it was just youthful chaos. I said we were lucky enough to evolve into friendship. Nathan stayed silent. After the toast, guests started to relax again. I made sure to keep smiling, to talk louder, to redirect attention. I told myself this was what strong women did. They didn't crumble because men got uncomfortable. I was managing optics. Nathan would understand later, once he calmed down. When dessert came, I leaned toward him and whispered that everything went fine. He didn't respond at first, then said, "Why did he have to be here?" I told him I wanted to be honest about my past. He said honesty and exhibition weren't the same thing. I told him he was being dramatic. He asked if I'd even noticed how his mother looked ready to cry. I said she was sensitive and needed thicker skin. He said maybe I needed more empathy. I laughed because that's what I do when things start to sting. I just wanted everyone to see we're confident, secure people, I told him, not the kind who hide from their history. He said quietly, "You don't bring your history to your engagement party." I turned away, pretending I didn't hear that. My mother came over, glowing with pride. She whispered that I was brilliant for handling both men so gracefully. She called it modern love. I smiled and told her she was right. Nathan excused himself to talk to his brother. I tried not to look at Julian, but he found me again before the night ended. He told me he missed how easily I used to laugh. I told him I was happier now, that Nathan gave me peace. He smiled and said, "Peace is just another word for boredom sometimes." I told him to stop being so cynical, but part of me liked that he still understood how to provoke me. As the party wound down, guests left in waves of perfume and laughter. Nathan shook hands, thanked everyone, did everything right. He looked like a man who'd memorized how to be gracious. I told him he was perfect, the calm in the storm. He didn't answer. Julian lingered at the door. He gave me that half smile again and said softly, "Don't let him turn you into someone quiet." I laughed it off, but Nathan heard. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Something sharp, final. When we got home, he barely spoke. I tried to tease him out of it, saying he was jealous, saying it was almost flattering. He said, "It's not jealousy, it's humiliation." I told him no one else saw it that way. He said maybe I'd surrounded myself with people who didn't know what respect meant. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying Julian's toast, the laughter, the looks, but I told myself it was fine. Eli would calm down, everyone would forget, and I'd come out looking poised and mature. That's what mattered most. Still, when I turned on my phone before bed, there it was, Julian's post from the party, a photo of us laughing mid-toast, captioned, "To the one that got away." My stomach dropped, but I didn't delete my comment under it. I wrote, "Some things never really go away. They just change shape." I convinced myself it was harmless. But deep down, I knew Nathan had seen it too. A week later, the air in my parents' house smelled like lemon polish and old books, the kind of smell that made everything feel stable and safe. I sat at the kitchen table with my mother, sipping coffee, flipping through wedding magazines. She was glowing, already talking about flower arrangements and seating charts as if nothing uncomfortable had happened at the engagement party. When I brought up Julian again, she didn't even blink. "It's sweet that you and he can be friends," she said. "It shows emotional intelligence." My father, reading the newspaper across from us, made a small sound, something between a sigh and a laugh, but didn't say anything. That's when the idea came to me, not as a plan, but as something that sounded poetic in my head. My father's back had been giving him trouble for months, and he hated attention. The thought of walking me down the aisle made him grimace. He said the tradition was outdated anyway. So I said, almost casually, maybe Julian could do it instead. My mother looked up, delighted. What a beautiful gesture. Closure and new beginnings all at once. I smiled, half joking, half serious. Exactly. It would show everyone how grown up we all are. My father lowered his paper. "Eveline, you might want to think before you do something like that," he said quietly. "People will talk." "People always talk," I said. At least they'll talk about how enlightened I am. That afternoon, when Nathan came to pick me up, I told him the plan as if it were already decided. He stared at me for a long moment, trying to understand if I was serious. "You want your ex-boyfriend to walk you down the aisle?" he asked finally. I laughed, pretending not to hear the edge in his voice. "It's symbolic. My dad can't, and Julian's been part of my story. It's not romantic, it's emotional history. You always say I'm sentimental." He said that was different. He said this was inappropriate, that it wasn't fair to him. I told him he was being small-minded, that I wasn't going to erase my past just to make him comfortable. He said, "This isn't about comfort, it's about respect." I told him that real respect means trust, and trust means not overreacting. Then I smiled and said, if he couldn't handle it, maybe he wasn't as evolved as I thought. That one landed. He got quiet. That was how I always knew I'd won, when he went quiet. Later that night, we had dinner with his family. Maggie was already tense when we arrived. I could feel her eyes following me across the room. At one point, she asked gently if I was planning to keep things simple at the ceremony. I told her yes, except for one special surprise. I said Julian might walk me down the aisle since my father's back was acting up. The room went still. Oliver dropped his fork. Maggie blinked as if she hadn't heard right. "You mean your ex-boyfriend?" she said finally. "Yes," I said. "We're friends now. I think it would show everyone how far we've come. Isn't forgiveness beautiful?" Nathan's face went pale. Maggie put her napkin down slowly. "That's not forgiveness," she said. "That's humiliation." I laughed softly, telling her she was being old-fashioned, that times were changing. She said some things shouldn't. Nathan stayed silent the rest of dinner, answering questions from his brother with one-word replies. When we got in the car, he finally spoke. "I can't believe you told my family before we even talked it through." I told him we'd already talked about it. He said, "No, you talked," and I disagreed. I said he was overthinking everything again, making drama where there was none. I explained how my mother supported me, how it would mean something special to me. He said, "It means something humiliating to me." I crossed my arms and said, maybe we weren't the same kind of people after all. I even added that maybe he liked the version of me that needed him too much. That's when he pulled over, looked at me and said quietly, "You don't need me at all, do you?" I told him not to be so dramatic. "I just need you to understand me," I said. "If you loved me enough, you would." He didn't argue. He just drove the rest of the way home in silence. That night, I called my mother again. She told me Nathan would come around, that men always needed time to catch up emotionally. She said I was ahead of my time, that I was brave for not letting jealousy dictate love. I liked the sound of that, brave. I texted Julian the next morning. "Would you do me a favor?" He wrote back instantly. "For you, anything." I told him about my father, about the symbolic idea, about how it would be beautiful closure. He said he'd be honored, that it was the most Eveline thing he'd ever heard. That made me laugh. I sent him a heart emoji. Nathan came by that evening to drop off some paperwork from the caterer. He looked tired. I asked if he was still upset. He said, "I'm trying not to be." I said I appreciated that, but then I added that he was making me feel guilty for something pure. He said it wasn't pure. It was inconsiderate. I told him that word didn't belong in our relationship. I said we were supposed to be better than other couples. He looked at me then, really looked, like he was seeing me for the first time. "If you go through with this," he said quietly, "you'll regret it." I told him I'd only regret not being true to myself. He just nodded, as if filing something away in his mind. That night, before bed, I texted Julian again. "It's official. You'll walk me down the aisle." He sent a confetti emoji and a photo of his suit, saying he'd wear the same one from the night we met for sentimental reasons. I smiled at my phone, thinking how poetic that was. When Nathan came over the next day, I showed him the text, thinking transparency would calm him down. Instead, he read it slowly, then set my phone back on the table. "You'd rather make a point than make a marriage," he said. I told him he was wrong. I said love was about being seen for who we really are. He said maybe that was the problem. He was finally seeing who I was. He left soon after. I told myself he'd cool off. He always did. But something about the way he closed the door, quiet, deliberate, made my chest tighten. When my mother called that evening, I told her not to worry. Everything was under control. She said I was handling things beautifully, that every strong woman gets misunderstood before she gets admired. I repeated that line in my head all night like a prayer. But deep down, I knew Nathan wasn't misunderstanding me. He understood perfectly, and that terrified me more than if he'd shouted. The church smelled like flowers and candle wax when I arrived for the rehearsal. Everyone was already there. Nathan, his family, the bridesmaids, the groomsmen, and, of course, Julian. He stood near the altar, hands in his pockets, looking completely at ease, like this was his event instead of mine. I told myself that was a good thing. Confidence always photographs well. I walked in smiling, determined to set the tone. My mother whispered that I looked radiant. My father nodded politely, his jaw tight. Nathan's family was another story. Maggie's smile didn't reach her eyes, and Oliver looked like he was waiting for something to explode. I told myself they'd thank me later for making this day unique, memorable, progressive. Julian greeted me first, giving me that familiar grin that used to make me reckless. "So this is where we do it," he said, gesturing toward the aisle. I laughed softly, ignoring the way Nathan stiffened. "Where you walk me," I corrected. "Let's not make headlines." He winked. "You already are the headline." The coordinator called everyone to attention and began explaining the order. I could feel Nathan's eyes on me as I positioned myself beside Julian. I pretended not to notice the tension, the whispers between Maggie and Oliver. The first walk-through was smooth, at least until Julian leaned close and murmured something like, "Feels nostalgic, doesn't it?" I told him to behave, keeping my voice light. But my stomach twisted when I saw Nathan watching us. During the mock ceremony, the coordinator joked that we made a beautiful pair. People laughed awkwardly. I smiled anyway, pretending it was all harmless fun. Nathan looked down at the floor. Afterward, we moved to the rehearsal dinner at a nearby hall. The lights were dim, the tables elegant, the mood forced. I made conversation, complimented the catering, tried to keep things cheerful. Julian, naturally, couldn't help himself. He started telling stories, little memories from when we dated. "Remember Paris?" he said, grinning across the table. "You made us late for every reservation because you wouldn't stop taking photos of yourself." The table chuckled nervously. I laughed too, pretending not to care. "Some things never change," I said. Nathan stayed quiet. Maggie excused herself halfway through the meal. My father kept drinking water instead of wine. My mother whispered that everything would smooth over once people relaxed. She said Nathan was just shy, unused to such openness. When dessert came, Julian clinked his glass. I didn't know he was planning another speech until he stood up. "Before we all go," he said, "I just want to say something." I smiled automatically, but my heart dropped. He went on about how love evolves, how we all learn to let go without really losing each other. He said I had always been his forever muse, that Nathan was lucky to have me because I was a rare kind of woman. Laughter flickered around the room, thin, uneasy. Nathan set his fork down. He didn't look at Julian, just at me. "Are you enjoying this?" he asked quietly. I said he was being rude. He said, "No, I'm being honest." Julian, oblivious, kept talking. "She taught me that love doesn't have to end, it can transform." He raised his glass toward Nathan. "To the man who gets to experience what I once did." The sound of clinking glasses echoed for a moment, then faded. Nathan stood up slowly. The scrape of his chair was louder than anything Julian had said. Without a word, he turned and walked out. People stared at me. Someone coughed. I forced a laugh and said, "He's just tired. It's been a long day." My voice came out too bright. My mother nodded, smiling awkwardly. Maggie didn't come back. Julian sat down, grinning as if he'd just given a toast worthy of applause. I leaned toward him and whispered that he was an idiot. He looked genuinely confused. "What?" "I was being kind," he said. After the dinner, I drove to Nathan's apartment. He wasn't home. I texted him that we needed to talk, that people were being dramatic. He didn't respond. I called 3 times, no answer. The next morning, I went back to the church to drop off some papers for the coordinator. Nathan was there, speaking with the pastor. When he saw me, he nodded politely but didn't come over. I asked if we could talk. He said, "We'll talk after the wedding." That wasn't good enough. "You can't just act like this because someone made a toast," I said. He looked at me then, his eyes cold. It wasn't a toast. It was a warning. I told him he was overreacting, that Julian was harmless, that everyone knew it. He said, "Everyone knows you still need him to make you feel interesting." That one hurt. I laughed to cover it up. "You're ridiculous," I said. "You're acting jealous, and jealousy is ugly." He shook his head. "No, disrespect is ugly." I walked out before he could say anything else. I called my mother, furious. She told me Nathan would come around. She said men always fall apart right before big commitments. She reminded me how perfect everything looked from the outside, how guests would be impressed, how forgiving Nathan would seem once he walked down that aisle. "Let him cool off," she said. "He'll thank you later for keeping things civil." That night, I went to bed rehearsing what I'd say to Nathan to fix things. Something soft, understanding, maybe even apologetic, but not actually sorry. I wasn't wrong, just misunderstood. I told myself he needed to see the bigger picture, that one day he'd laugh about this with me. The next morning, Julian sent me a message. "Don't let him guilt you. You're doing something beautiful." I stared at it for a long time before replying, "Thank you. I needed that." When I finally saw Nathan again at the venue walkthrough, he barely spoke. I tried to make jokes, to remind him how far we'd come, but he just nodded. His silence was unbearable. I kept telling myself it was nerves. Everyone gets nervous before a wedding. At the end of the day, as we packed up the decorations, he said quietly, "Are you proud of how you handled tonight?" I said, "Of course I am. You should be proud too. We're showing people what love really means." He stared at me for a long time before saying, "You don't know what love means." I rolled my eyes, grabbed my purse, and told him he was impossible. But as I drove home, the words wouldn't stop echoing in my head. "You don't know what love means." I told myself he was just hurt. He'd get over it. He always did. Still, that night, when I scrolled through social media and saw that someone had posted a clip of Julian's toast online with the caption, "X goals," my stomach dropped. The video already had hundreds of comments, and I knew, with a sinking feeling, that Nathan had seen it too. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, I woke up expecting an apology. Maybe not from Nathan, but from someone, Julian, my mother, anyone who'd let the night go off the rails. Instead, I woke to silence. No texts, no calls. My phone felt too light, like the whole world had gone quiet on purpose. I got out of bed, made coffee, and told myself everything was fine. It was just nerves. Big moments always made people tense. Still, when I opened my messages, the first thing I saw was a missed call from Oliver. That was strange. He never called me directly. Then a text from him came through. "You should probably talk to Nathan before this gets worse." Worse? I didn't even know what that meant. I called him right away, but he didn't answer. A minute later, another message. "He's done, Eveline." He said he's not going through with it. I laughed out loud, sitting at my kitchen counter in my robe. Not going through with it? That wasn't possible. People don't just cancel weddings the day before. They cry, argue, maybe postpone, but they don't walk away. Especially not someone like Nathan, who hated conflict so much he apologized when other people hurt him. I tried calling Nathan next, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Can we talk like adults? You're blowing this out of proportion." No reply. By noon, my mother called, her voice pitched high with false calm. "Don't panic," she said, "but Maggie told me Nathan went to stay with Oliver last night." "Why?" I asked, though I already knew. "She said he needed space," my mother said carefully, which I told her is perfectly normal before a big event. Some men just retreat. I wanted to believe that, but my father's voice cut in from the background. "He's not retreating, Clara. He's withdrawing." I hung up before they could start another argument about me. The hours crawled by. I kept checking my phone, refreshing messages that never came. Finally, around 3 o'clock, I got a notification, an email from one of our wedding vendors. "Dear Ms. Dorr, this is to confirm the cancellation of your event reservation, effective immediately. Refund has been initiated to Mr. Cole's account." My heart stopped. I reread it twice. Refund? Cancellation? I opened my inbox again. There were 6 more just like it. Venue, caterer, photographer, all confirming cancellation, all mentioning refunds to Mr. Cole. I called the venue manager. She sounded uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, Ms. Dorr, but Mr. Cole provided written notice this morning, along with legal documentation authorizing the withdrawal. Everything was under his name." "Legal documentation," I repeated. "For a wedding?" She hesitated. "I think you should probably speak to him directly." By the time I hung up, my hands were shaking. This couldn't be happening. I called my mother again, but this time her voice was sharper. "What did you do, Eveline? He's gone to the bank, too." "What bank?" "The joint one for the wedding fund. He's frozen the account." I laughed, a hollow sound. "He can't do that. That's our money." "No," she said quietly. "It's his. You never changed the paperwork." I could hear my father in the background again, muttering something like, "He's smarter than she thought." That stung more than anything. By evening, I finally got a text. Not from Nathan, but from Maggie. It was short and cold. "My son deserves peace. Please respect his decision. Peace." The word made me furious. Who was she to decide what peace looked like for him? He was making a mess out of everything I'd built, everything I'd planned. I told myself I needed to control the narrative before people started gossiping. So I opened my social media app, posted a long caption under one of our engagement photos. "Love isn't linear. Sometimes 2 people need space before they can find their rhythm again." I'm proud of how honest we've been through this journey. It sounded wise, forgiving, perfectly curated vulnerability. Within an hour, it had dozens of likes, even a few comments saying how mature I was. My mother reposted it, adding heart emojis. But then Julian commented, "Couldn't be prouder of you for following your heart." My stomach dropped. That made it worse. It made it look like something was going on. I deleted his comment immediately, but not before a few people had liked it. 10 minutes later, another notification. A new message from Nathan. My heart leapt, but it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't even a message, just a forwarded email from our wedding coordinator with a note at the bottom in his tone. Calm, precise. "Effective immediately. All arrangements are cancelled. I've settled remaining balances. Please remove my name from any associated materials. Consider this the formal termination of all wedding agreements. No explanation, no apology, nothing." I stared at it for a long time, reading the lines over and over, hoping I'd find some trace of emotion hidden between the words. There was none. When my mother found out, she was furious. "He can't just leave you hanging like this," she said. "We'll talk to a lawyer if we have to." My father stopped her. "No," he said. She pushed him too far. That night, I couldn't sit still. I paced the apartment, replaying every word, every look, trying to twist it into something that still made sense. Maybe he was testing me. Maybe he wanted me to chase him. That's what people do when they love someone. They fight. I sent one last message before midnight. Nathan, please. This is a mistake. We can fix it if you'd just come home. I watched the screen until the text switched to delivered, but it never changed to read. The next morning, a knock came at the door. I opened it expecting my mother, or maybe Nathan, ready to make peace. But it was a delivery man holding a thick envelope. He handed it to me, asked for a signature, and left. Inside were official-looking papers, notice of wedding contract termination and refund reallocation. The last page was signed by Nathan Cole. I sank onto the couch, the room spinning. I wanted to cry, but anger felt safer. I told myself he'd regret this, that once people saw how cold he was, they'd side with me. I even opened my phone again, ready to post something subtle and dignified, like sometimes love teaches us when to let go. But before I could type it, I noticed another message, this time from Julian. Guess it's just us again. For the first time, the words didn't feel flattering. They felt like proof that Nathan was gone, and that I'd handed him every reason to leave. Still, I told myself he'd come around eventually. He had to. After all, people don't just walk away from someone like me. Do they? The following week blurred into a mix of denial and chaos. The flowers, the catering, the dress, all of it was gone. I kept thinking there had to be some mistake, that Nathan couldn't have possibly meant it. People don't just undo a wedding like returning a defective product, not after everything we'd built. The first morning after the cancellation went public, I woke to 40 unread messages. My mother, friends, co-workers, all asking if it was true. I texted back something vague. We're taking some time apart before finalizing plans, mutual decision. It sounded controlled, mature, safe, but even typing it made me want to scream. I hadn't heard from Nathan since the courier. Not a word. It was as if he'd disappeared into the clean, quiet world he always preferred. No emotion, no mess, just logic. That was his strength, and suddenly, his weapon. By noon that day, my mother showed up at my apartment uninvited. She was furious, pacing in her heels, phone in hand. He's lucky you haven't gone to the press, she said. This is slander, emotional abandonment, humiliation in public. You could sue. I told her to calm down. She said she'd already spoken to her friend whose cousin was a lawyer. He can't just vanish, she insisted. He owes you compensation for the time and planning. I barely listened. My mind was elsewhere, imagining Nathan's face when he'd decided to pull the plug, cold, detached, certain. That was what hurt most. Not that he left, but that he did it cleanly. No fight, no last word, just paperwork. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. Ms. Dorr, a man's voice said. I represent Mr. Nathan Cole. I'd like to arrange a short meeting regarding financial closures. Financial closures? I repeated. We were supposed to be married, not divorced. He paused. It's standard. My client would like all obligations settled. He's already withdrawn his contributions to shared accounts. You should expect a formal summary this week. I laughed. He's really doing this through lawyers? Yes, ma'am, the man said politely. He prefers to avoid further contact. Avoid contact. That phrase echoed in my head for hours. Nathan wasn't angry. He was strategic. That night, I poured wine and opened my laptop, searching my inbox for anything I could use to make sense of it all. Emails from vendors, the coordinator, even the ring designer. Every single one referenced refunds credited back to Nathan's accounts. I had nothing. My mother had been wrong. Everything had been under his name. I called my father. He answered on the third ring, his voice heavy. Eveline, I told you this would happen if you kept pushing. I didn't push, I said, defensive. I tried to create something meaningful. He overreacted. My father sighed. Meaningful isn't a word for what you did. You humiliated him, then expected him to smile. I snapped that he was supposed to be on my side. He said quietly, "I'm on the side of reality." When I hung up, the silence in the apartment felt enormous. I tried calling Lacey, one of my bridesmaids, to vent. She hesitated before answering, then said gently, "Eve, people are talking. Maybe just stay offline for a while." I asked, "Talking about what?" She sighed. "The rehearsal video. Someone leaked Julian's toast. Everyone's seen it. It's all over social media." My stomach dropped. "What video?" "The one where he called you his muse," she said quietly. "People think you were cheating." I laughed too loudly. "That's ridiculous." "I know, but optics matter," she said. "Nathan's friends have been commenting, without names, but everyone can tell who they mean." I hung up before she could say more. Then, against my better judgment, I opened my phone. It was everywhere. Clips, screenshots, slow-motion videos, even captions like, "She really invited her ex to her own wedding." Comments poured in beneath every post. Some people defended me, saying it was empowering. Others called me pathetic, manipulative, selfish. The second group was louder. I tried to post something to fix the narrative. I wrote a caption under an old photo of me and Nathan on the beach. Sometimes love ends quietly, with two people realizing they need different things. I stared at it for 10 minutes, then deleted it. No one would believe me anymore. The next day, I decided to go straight to the source. Nathan's office. I dressed carefully, white blouse, calm makeup, understated jewelry. I told myself if he saw me steady and composed, he'd remember who I was before all the noise. The receptionist froze when I walked in. "He's in a meeting," she said. "I'll wait," I replied. I waited an hour, then 2. When the door finally opened, it wasn't Nathan who stepped out, but a young man in a grey suit. He looked barely older than a college student. "Ms. Dorr?" he said. "Yes," I said, standing. He handed me a sealed envelope. "Mr. Cole asked me to deliver this personally." "What is it?" He didn't answer. "Have a good day, ma'am." Then he left. Inside was a letter on legal stationery, Nathan's signature at the bottom. It was written in his usual calm, even tone. "All shared financial matters have been closed. I wish you clarity moving forward. Please do not contact me again directly. My representation can address any remaining logistics." I read it twice. It wasn't even angry. It was surgical. The more I read it, the more furious I became. That night, my mother called again, threatening to go public with the story to make him look cruel. My father told her to stop meddling. Their argument played through the phone, voices overlapping. I hung up, poured another glass of wine, and scrolled through old photos. Me laughing at the engagement party, Julian's arm around me, Nathan standing stiffly beside us. Had I really ruined everything over symbolism, over wanting to look enlightened? I tried to tell myself no, that Nathan was weak, too conventional to understand me. But the truth clawed at me anyway. I had used him as proof that I'd moved on, when I never really had. The next morning, another courier came. I almost didn't open the door, but curiosity won. This time, it wasn't legal papers, it was a small box. Inside was the ring. My engagement ring. Polished, perfect, sitting on top of a note that said only 2 words. "Refund processed." I stared at it until my eyes blurred. I wanted to throw it, to break it, to do anything but feel the humiliation washing over me. Instead, I set it back in the box carefully, like it was fragile. By nightfall, I stopped answering calls. My mother left voicemails demanding action. My father sent one text that read simply, "Let it go." I deleted Julian's number. I didn't even know why, maybe to prove I could. Still, every so often, I imagined Nathan opening his laptop, smiling quietly, living a life untouched by all of this. The calm he'd always wanted, finally his. And for the first time, I realized that was his revenge. He didn't destroy me. He simply erased me. The apartment was almost empty by the time the final papers came. I had packed most of my things into neat boxes, not because I was moving, but because I couldn't stand looking at reminders anymore. The framed save-the-date card, the guest list taped to the fridge, the ivory shoes I never wore, all symbols of something that never existed the way I thought it did. The knock came just after sunset. I didn't bother checking the peephole. I already knew it wouldn't be him. It never was. Another courier, another envelope. I signed automatically and closed the door before he could even speak. The papers were heavier this time. An official packet from Nathan's lawyer. Final notice, settlement of personal and financial agreements. At the bottom was a clause stating that I was prohibited from using his name or likeness in any form of media, to preserve the privacy and dignity of all parties involved. Privacy and dignity. Words I used to think applied only to people who had something to hide. Now they were being used to lock me out of my own story. I sat on the couch for a long time, reading the lines over and over, trying to find a way to twist them into something hopeful. There wasn't one. It was done. He hadn't yelled, hadn't demanded, hadn't humiliated me in return. He'd just ended it quietly, like closing a tab on a screen. I opened my laptop and saw his name everywhere. The leaked video of Julian's toast was still making rounds online, paired with old photos of me and Nathan smiling at events. Headlines called it the cancelled wedding of the year. Strangers debated my character as if I were a case study. Some called me selfish, others said I was brave. The comments blended into one long blur of judgment and curiosity. For a moment, I thought about posting a response, something reflective and strong, a caption about how women are always punished for being emotional. I even typed it out. Sometimes love fails because people fear complexity. I stared at the words, but they rang hollow. I deleted them before anyone could see. I poured a drink instead and stood by the window, watching the city glow. Somewhere across town, Nathan was probably having dinner with his family, maybe even smiling. I pictured him sitting beside Maggie, calm, content, his phone face down on the table. Maybe he'd already told them it was over. Maybe they were relieved. My own phone buzzed with a single notification, an email from Julian. The subject line read, "You don't deserve this." I didn't open it. For once, I didn't want to read words that made me feel special. Special had cost me everything. I turned off the lights, letting the apartment fade into shadow. In the quiet, I could almost hear Nathan's voice, the steady tone he used when explaining something simple but final. "I wish you clarity moving forward." Clarity. The word used to sound clinical. Now it felt like a sentence. I set the papers back in their envelope and placed them on the coffee table. My hand brushed against the ring box, still unopened since it was returned. I lifted the lid. The diamond caught the dim light, glittering like it was mocking me. I thought about how he'd written "refund processed" on that note. No anger, no hate, just balance restored. Everything neat, fair, and final. For the first time, I understood why that silence hurt more than anything he could have said. He hadn't punished me. He'd just stopped seeing me. Outside, a car alarm went off, then died. The city went back to its usual hum. I sat there until the glass in my hand went warm, staring at the contract that had replaced a wedding. It struck me then how strange it was that a life could end without breaking, only fading, line by line, document by document, until there was nothing left to argue about. I whispered his name once, quietly, as if saying it could undo everything. It didn't. And when the last bit of daylight disappeared, I realized I wasn't waiting for him anymore. Only for the sound of the paper settling as it cooled on the table, proof that even endings can be perfectly still. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.